Hi, my name is Chad Biller, and I'm the Director of Research here at Greenacres. Standing here with Jonathan Gavis, our Manager of Livestock Operations. Today we're in one of our pastures, and we're going to be talking about how we raise our beef and how that can impact the nutritional quality of the Greenacres grass-fed and grass-finished beef. So Jonathan, one of the things that can often be confusing for consumers are labels. And when we talk about beef, there's a lot of different labels that we see. We see, organic, antibiotic-free, grain-fed, grass-fed, grain-finished. And then we have grass-fed, grass-finished like we raise here at Greenacres. Can you tell us a little bit about what would be the difference between a grass-fed product that we might see and then a grass-fed, grass-finished like we raise here?
Yeah, Chad, that's a great question. I think there is a lot of confusion surrounding labeling and what everything actually means. And as Chad mentioned, we are 100% grass-fed and grass-finished here at Greenacres. And the biggest difference between the two is that the majority of the cattle born in the country are grass-fed. They're going to be eating grass at some point in their life. And that's simply how that term is used in labeling, is that they had grass, and so they can be labeled as grass-fed. They could be grain-finished at that point, which is what we're talking about here, the difference between the two. So our cattle are grass-fed, and then finishing is what occurs in the last 60 to 90 days of the animal's life. That's generally when a head of feeder cattle would be moved into a feedlot and fed grain, where they're going to be gaining 2 to 3 pounds a day to get that finished weight. What we do here is utilize our pasture to get that finish. So we don't have a necessarily specific protocol for that finishing aside from the way we move the cattle, but we attempt to get the most nutritious grass we can into the animals that we're finishing, therefore getting that same high quality finish that you would get from a grain-fed animal.
So Jonathan, one of the things you touched on a minute ago was actually the way we graze our cattle as well. It's not just sticking them out on grass and just letting them eat whatever they want. There's some nuance to that. Can you please describe what you refer to as our leader-follower here with our grazing management?
Sure. So the leader-follower method of grazing is kind of new to us. We started doing it because our feeder cattle, the ones that we're finishing to harvest, have much higher nutrient requirements than the cows behind us. In order to achieve that, we need to be moving them quickly, and they need to be in pastures that have the highest nutrition possible. So when we move animals into a pasture, they're going to have access to the kind of grass that they need, but it's going to be in a much larger space, because if we ask them to take that second bite instead of only first bites, they're not getting the optimum nutrition. Unfortunately, when we manage our feeders like that, that means that we're not managing the pasture in the most effective way to maintain the quality of the forage. So what we'll do is move the feeders through in a much larger section, and then the next day, the cows, which are right behind us now, will move in and then help maintain that pasture by taking that second and third bite. So if you look down here, you can see the feeders have already been in here, and they've taken on all of these blades of fescue, they've taken that first bite, which is where all of the nutrition is. And so now there's less nutrition in what's below it, and the cows will do just fine on that. So we'll move them in because they're really just trying to maintain their weight and produce milk for their calves. We don't really need to get a finishing weight on them per se.
Fantastic. So the most nutritious bites of the grass plant is the top third, you would say?
Sure.
So the feeder cattle, or the cattle that we're turning into beef, they're going to get that most nutritious bite because their nutritional requirements are higher.
Exactly.
So you mentioned that you want to maintain your pasture. So bringing the cows, which are behind us, in after the beef herd, how does that pasture management, how can that impact the nutritional quality of the forages as well?
Well, what we really like to see is an even plane of nutrition across the entire pasture. And so if we were to manage all of our pastures just the way we were talking about with the leaders, where they could come in and get exactly what they want and then leave behind the stuff they didn't, what we'd end up seeing is a weakening of the plants that are desirable and more nutritious, and then plants that are less desirable, such as the warm season annuals, which you can see the brown stuff behind us again, that they didn't really graze. If we only managed with the feeders, they would be leaving that stuff behind, and then that stuff would eventually start to outcompete the more nutritious, desirable plants. So by bringing the cows in after them, they're coming through and grazing everything because the stocking density is higher than the feeders are, and they're helping us maintain that level of nutrition. So by coming in and grazing what the feeders miss to about a 50%, we want to leave about 50% of the forage here, they are helping us maintain that quality of pasture. If we take less than 50%, the root structure of the plant stays more intact, which will help nutrition in the future as well.
Yeah, it's amazing how just the way you're managing the cattle today is setting up for better nutrition in the future.
Yeah, it really is something, because if we take just 50% of a plant, that only affects the root structure by 3 or 4%. But if we take 60% of a plant, we're losing 50% of the root mass there. So really the take half, leave half is a really solid guiding principle for helping us maintain that nutrition. And the way to achieve that is just by making sure you have the right number of cows in the right amount of space.
Fantastic. So as you can see, there's a lot of variability that goes into raising grass-fed and grass-finished beef, like we do here at Greenacres. As the seasons change, the nutritional quality of the pastures change, and that changes the management. Jonathan, thanks so much for spending some time out here with me and really explaining how you guys are managing the pastures to make sure we're getting our consumers the most nutritional product we can. So we'll see you next time here at Greenacres.